oldest cold cases in Sacramento County is now solved.
52 years, the family of Marie Bennallack finally had justice after her brutal murder in her Arden Arcade apartment.
Oldest cold case finally solved. Nancy Marie. Another mysterious case solved. The oldest unsolved case in Sacramento County has been solved 52 years after a county court reporter was murdered. The suspected killer's identity is known, according to the authorities. Nancy Marie Bennallack was having a sinister event take place in her apartment's bedroom on the night of October 25, 1970, in Sacramento, California, while the city slept. The next day, Nancy didn't show up for work, so a coworker asked her son to keep an eye out for her there. When they both entered, they discovered Nancy Marie's lifeless body covered in blood. What evil might have been present in the apartment that fateful night? Who could have killed this kind and intelligent young woman cold-bloodedly? Without saying anything more, let's proceed to the edge of the mystery. Sacramento, the state capital of California, is a great combination of business and culture. Situated where the American and Sacramento rivers converge, this farm-to-fork city has a respectable population. Sacramento is one of the best places to live in the United States because of the relief provided by the surrounding greenery. But on the fateful night of October 25, 1970, it wasn't the safest place for Nancy Bennallack. The Bennallack family's world was turned upside down by the night, which brought a cloud of darkness into their lives. On June 13, 1942, Nancy Marie Bennallack was born. Around 1970, Nancy, a 28-year-old woman from Nevada, California, lived with her cat in apartment number 17 of a building on Arden Way, Bell Street in Sacramento. It was a stunning second-story apartment. She was employed by the Sacramento District Court as a court reporter. When she was happily engaged to Ferris and Salami in the fall of 1970, Nancy was at her happiest. Nancy worked in the Sacramento District Court, where Salami, the chief public defender, was ecstatically engaged and preparing to tie the knot on November 28th of the same year. The happy couple was spending a lot of time together at this time. After spending the previous evening together, Ferris Salami and Nancy Bennallack went out to dinner on a fateful October night. Once Nancy was asleep, they went back to her apartment and continued their conversation there. Salami then made the decision to go to his own house. Salami left the Bell Street apartment with the sliding glass door slightly ajar as the time read 11:30 p.m. That night, he simply followed Nancy's habit of leaving the door open for her cat to enter and exit. He had no idea that it would be the last time he would ever see his fiancée. In fact, it was the last time anyone had ever seen Nancy Marie Bennallack alive. Once Nancy failed to show up for work on October 26, 1970, coworkers began to worry. She usually gave a warning before canceling, so it was unusual. Jola Moncrief, a coworker and friend of Nancy's, called her son Jack to check in on her. Jack repeatedly knocked on the door, but no one answered, so he hurried to the building manager for help. The manager hesitated at first, but after learning more about the circumstance, he consented to use a passkey to unlock Nancy's apartment door. They entered to see the horrifying scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives after the manager opened the door. When Jack and the apartment manager entered the bedroom of Nancy Bennallack's second-floor Bell Street apartment, a horrifying crime scene was waiting for them. Nancy was brutally stabbed to death and was lying dead in her bed with numerous defensive wounds on her arms. There was blood all over the crime scene, but no fingerprints were found inside the apartment, indicating that the murderer had likely taped his fingers to prevent leaving a print since gloves were not as readily available in the 1970s. She had been assaulted in such a horrifying manner that her head had almost been severed. The police found a blood trail that went from the second-story balcony down to the sidewalk below, but it didn't stop there. Instead, it continued along the sidewalk to two other apartment buildings before ending in the parking lot. Investigators at the time assumed that the murderer fled the parking lot in a car because the blood trail indicated that the victim most likely had knife wounds. More than 30 stab wounds were discovered on Nancy's body when the medical examiner's office looked at her body more closely. Investigators think Nancy was killed between midnight on October 25th and the early hours of October 26, 1970, based on their findings. Within a month of the murder, more than 500 people were questioned, but no suspects were ever identified. The motive was unknown. but crime scene reconstruction revealed how the suspect entered Nancy's apartment. According to investigators, the suspect was an agile person who climbed up the second-story balcony and entered Nancy's room through the slightly open door while she was sleeping. Additionally, many defensive wounds were discovered. Nancy had no known enemies, and there were few leads to follow. In the 1970s, when technology was less developed than it is today, it was only possible to determine someone's blood group from the blood left at the crime scene. However, with no solid evidence and no leads to follow, the case went cold. It's possible that the attacker's injuries during the assault were what caused the killer to end up leaving the blood trail alone. Obviously, some steps were taken over the years, but families and friends had to wait for many years before the murder was finally solved. During the course of the investigation, detectives discovered a startling bit of information. Earlier in the same year as Nancy's murder, a woman by the name of Judith Harkray was also killed in the same area. Detectives discovered many similarities between the two women. Both were about the same age, lived just a mile apart, and were soon to be married. Sadly, up until this point, there has never been any tangible proof to back up the idea that the two killings were related or that the infamous Zodiac Killer was accountable for both of the women's deaths. Judith Hikari's murder is still unsolved despite a DNA profile created in 2004 using blood collected from the crime scene and uploaded to the state and federal CODIS databases that produced no matches with any offender's profile. The case was unable to be kept active. But 15 years after Nancy's passing, using the same resources used to identify the infamous Golden State Killer, detectives from the District Attorney's Office and the Sacramento County Sheriff's Cold Case team started a forensic genetic genealogy investigation in November 2019. To track down Nancy's killer, the DNA profile was posted on the open-source genealogy website. The murderer of 28-year-old Nancy Marie Bennallack was finally identified as Richard John Davis on July 21, 2022, after 3 more years of waiting. Meanwhile, over the course of the previous 50 years, science had advanced. Sacramento County District Attorney Anne-Marie Schubert stated in the media in reference to the long-standing case. Nancy and Richard John Davis, both 27 at the time of the crime, lived in apartment number 17 and 23 respectively, in the same apartment building. On March 22, 1943, Richard John Davis was born. Richard Davis had intended to commit the murder that day, according to retired detective Mickey Lynx, who was speaking at a press conference about the crime. He scaled the balcony the night of the murder to gain entry to Nancy's apartment. They were on opposite sides of a pool, and Davis could see Nancy's apartment across the pool. Detectives made the assumption that Richard may have had a crush on his neighbor Nancy and killed her after finding out about her marriage because he covered all of his fingers with masking tape to hide his fingerprints, suggesting that premeditation was present even though no one could be certain of it. Out of the 500 people the sheriff's office spoke with in the first month after the murder, Schubert was informed that Davis and his roommate were also there. Nancy's family and Mr. Salami, Nancy's then-fiancé, had given up hope that this case would never be solved. But after 52 long years, the oldest cold case in Sacramento County was finally solved in 2022. Davis had no prior convictions other than a driving under the influence charge. This was likely the reason why there was no DNA match in the CODIS database at the initial stages of the investigation. With that, we have come to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. And guys, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also press the bell icon so you can watch the upcoming videos. Also, share your thoughts in the comment box below.